Brick by brick. Today is an opportunity to continue to build. An opportunity to continue to build toward your future. Today we have the opportunity to lay more bricks upon our foundation. Each day we are given, we have the opportunity to improve, to get better, and to learn more. Each day we are given, we have the opportunity to do more and be more. Building takes time. Laying a foundation takes time. Creating lasting change takes time. Each opportunity we are given to lay another brick needs to be taken advantage of. We do not have infinite time to build. We are all on a deadline. Some opportunities in life may only present themselves once. We need to be ready. We need to be prepared. Preparation will create opportunity. Build today. Continue to build today. Brick by brick. Look at each task within your day as an opportunity to lay another brick toward the future. Embrace the process. Enjoy the building. Live in the present with eyes on the future. Today is a gift. Today is an opportunity. Build, create, educate. Wander, wonder, explore, serve. And above all else, love, brick by brick. And with that being read, I want to welcome you back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is a husband, father, coach, trainer for the Positive Coaching Alliance, and the founder of Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8. Today's guest is Tyler Johnson. Tyler, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's just dive right in with a quick little warm up. Is there, Tyler, a favorite book that you have or a book that you gift often?
Yes and no. I guess quick answer to that. Favorite book is usually the current one or books I'm reading.
Okay, cool.
I mean, obviously some stick out over years, but I learned a long time from one of the CEO of Positive Coaching Alliance how to look at a book more as a conversation between you and the author.
Cool. Okay.
And it led to reading more books because you can come back to a conversation. Absolutely. And it didn't have that. I got to complete the whole book. So that current conversation I'm having or that current author I'm reading is usually my favorite. Books I gift the most. Usually try to fit them with the person. If it's something that I've read or struck. Lately with basketball coaches, I want to gift Alan Stein Jr.'s book called Raise Your Game. I do some social media work and videos for John Gordon, so I'm a fan of his arsenal of awesome books as well. And those are some of the recent ones, I guess.
Okay, sweet. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I know I mentioned this before we turned on the podcast, but if you go to your Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8 Instagram page, it's full of quotes. So, and I'm a huge kind of quote mantra guy myself. So, this might be kind of a hard question for you. But is there a favorite quote or mantra that you really apply to your life or really has impacted your life?
Yeah, I think the one, and I'm glad you kind of let me chew on that one for a minute. But the one that I think I always come back to is, and I don't know, I can't remember if someone actually said it or if it's anonymous or whatever, right. It's just that simple. Do what you can with what you got wherever you are.
Right.
And I think it brings you back to the moment. It gives you perspective of what's in front of you. What can you do? How can you make a difference where you're at? So I think that's one of the ones that I find in life coming back to. That's a good life quote for myself.
Is there, because I know on the Instagram there's a lot of quotes that you have by coaches like John Wooden and athletes. Is there maybe like a quote from a professional coach or a professional athlete that kind of stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I think originally Phil Jackson said it about basketball, but just kind of as it relates to coaching is, he said in one of his books, I can't remember, but basketball is a lot more than basketball or
right.
something to that nature. And I think you can plug in whatever sport or activity it is for a kid or adult, and it's a lot more than just what it is. School is a lot more than school, and sports are a lot more than sports. And so that was, I think, always something that gives perspective to maybe you have a task or objective like the sport at hand, but really there's a foundational thing, brick by brick, that you start with that makes those things a success.
Right, and that kind of brings up a thought in my mind with even I think like LeBron James here after our president had said something, I think towards some athletes or something. LeBron James, I think kind of his thing now is more than an athlete. I think that's kind of like a hashtag or kind of something that he's putting out there in the world, and I think that lines right up with that quote, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up too, because I was just reading this week. They just recently had this MIT Sloan's Analytics conference for all these numbers, and one of the big topics they had was some research and stuff around the NBA and the mindset of athletes, this identity that they're only a basketball player, they're isolated in their fame, and really seeing pro athletes struggling more with difficult mental things. And so I think it was just that identity too, that everyone's more than just whatever they do.
Absolutely, yeah, that's powerful. I think that's why we see a lot of professional athletes once they get injured and are forced to not play their sport anymore, they retire. I mean, even like Jason Witten. I mean, he retired, went into the broadcasting booth, and now he's back. And I know I played a year of college football, but sports was my life growing up. And once I was done with football, done with sports, like organized sports, I honestly went into a dark period because that was my identity. I went to school so that I could play sports. All these different associations, and basically my whole life was wrapped around sports. And once that was done, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be for me not to, have that goal of like, hey, we got to, try to make it to the championship game or what have you, or just even I hear a lot of professional athletes say they don't really miss the training and all that, but they miss the locker room, they miss the camaraderie. And so it's just, even for myself on a very low level, experience that just kind of hardship, or however you want to word it, of like, you have this, it's your identity, and then the next day it's gone. It's like, dude, it's tough. It really is. So
yeah, I think I just heard someone recently say this about, you ask someone about a championship and they're going to tell you about relationships. I think you said another word. It's like you asked someone about their hardships, they're going to tell you about relationships too. And I think that's really where a lot of the value is. And I think we miss those when they're so consistent like they are on sports teams. For sure.
All right, so just the last question here as a part of the warm-up, Tyler, favorite or most listened to podcast?
Yeah, I think a couple of the ones that I really like right now is one, Focus 3 podcast with Tim and Brian Kite, John Gordon, who I mentioned, his Positive University podcast, and then another one called Growing Leaders with Tim Elmore out of Atlanta, which is one I really like as well.
Cool. The positive one you said, is that called Positive University?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's dive into a little bit of your background, your backstory. So let's start off with just kind of like where you were born, where you were raised, and let's just start talking about and unpacking some of those early childhood experiences that have kind of shaped and molded you into the man that you are today.
All right.
So where were you born at?
I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
Both my parents were from the Midwest in Iowa. They lived down there for 10 years. And me and my sister were both born on the campus of LSU.
Okay, cool.
Down there. So.
Is that did your parents go to LSU then, and that's where they met and everything, or what?
No.
Oh,
They were both from Iowa, went to school in Iowa as well.
Oh, okay.
It was just my dad's job. He worked for John Deere pretty much for almost 40 years, and he's in territorial sales management down there. So he was traveling a lot around the South when we were young and lived there, and that's where the family started.
Okay, cool. And then the transition is you were born down in Louisiana, but I think what you shared with me before we started the podcast is you spent most of your childhood, though, growing up in the state of Iowa, right?
Yeah,
okay.
My parents moved back, transferred with my dad's job to Des Moines area when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And grew up there until I left for college.
Okay. So, like when you were growing up and everything, was I'm assuming it was, but was sports and athletics a huge part of your life as well?
Yeah. I mean, it was. I think it was. You move to a new neighborhood, you find where the kids were at in the backyard. Back in that day, and so it was always doing something outdoors. So
Cool.
my parents they refused always to buy me any kind of video game system. I did with some of my own savings and jobs later on in life, and I learned different those lessons. But it was something that we were always outdoors. I was big. We had a huge woods behind our house when I was a kid, so we loved to build forts too. So we were always climbing trees and building forts and that kind of thing out.
The good old days, right, man?
Yeah, I mean,
you don't see it, dude. Like
people would think it's weird now if your neighbor that was like the nicest, sweetest old man came over and gave your kids 4 hammers and a box of nails they couldn't even carry. They'd be like, "What is this guy doing?" But that's what our neighbor used to do. Like, go build forts.
Yep. Yeah. My younger brother Brett and I, we lived on I think 2 or 3 acres in northwest Iowa, and I mean we just go out exploring, play cowboys and Indians. We play cops and robbers. We had the 2 neighbors around us, Oli and Emily. They were an older couple. We'd go over there. They'd give us pop and whatever candy, and then the other lady, she would just a Connie. She was a sweet lady, and like my parents, we just roamed. We just were out exploring, like you said, doing the whole climbing the trees and being out in the woods and out in the fresh air. And like my parents was like, Quentin and Brett will come back eventually. You know what I mean? Like it's just. And nowadays, like you drive around, especially in a bigger city like we live in and stuff. It's like, dude, you hardly ever see kids not even out shooting hoops or anything. Like, it's crazy. You don't see kids riding bikes. You don't see kids climbing trees or anything. It's so different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, free play's changed, and a lot of that came with safety, society things.
Right,
and
for sure.
A lot of double-edged swords. I think there. But yeah, man, we just grew up. Our neighborhood was still under construction, so we would just ride to the construction. Like, where's your scrap pile?
Right.
And the construction guys would laugh at us trying to ride our bikes and carry scrap wood back to the woods, And when we weren't doing that, it was baseball, basketball somewhere.
So you played baseball, basketball. Did you ever? Because I mean, wrestling is God in Iowa. Did you ever get into wrestling and football as well, or?
No, wrestling is a funny story because really one of the best coaches I had that really helped shape me as an athlete was my sophomore football coach, and he was a varsity wrestling coach. And our school was coming off dual state title, team state title, always perpetual in there. And when I was also a freshman, I only weighed like 130 pounds, so I was not very big. Sophomore year, I didn't even weigh maybe 145, and he tried to get me to wrestle. At the end of that football season, I actually had a broken foot, and I still was trying to begin wrestling. I was like, I can't do this, and I couldn't play basketball either, so I ended up spending that winter in a cast in a walking boot. But I got my taste of about 2 weeks of Iowa wrestling with our good program, and to me, it was man, I had a big admiration for wrestlers. I still do.
Yeah.
A lot of our best teammates, of course, were great wrestlers in Iowa.
Sure.
My buddy that was actually best athlete at our high school, he was a 2-time state champ and 1-time runner-up. So even going to watch him was still some of the best times to go see Iowa high school wrestling.
Yeah. The Iowa State wrestling tournament is. I mean, I remember when we had some guys wrestling in state when I was in high school. Like you just have the buses, dude, from Cherokee, which is northwest Iowa. It's a good, legit 3-hour drive. You know what I mean? But everybody would jump on, bust down just to watch a couple people. We never had like a team or anything, just 1 or 2 wrestlers, maybe 3 or 4, something like that, but always small. But yeah, I mean, it's big time. It really is.
Yeah.
So, but now, was football then, like once you got into high school and everything, was football kind of like the main sport and the main focus for you for the high school years, or not necessarily?
Yeah, pretty good. Football and track.
Football and track, okay.
My dad ran a little bit of track at Iowa State. So that's where I got a little bit of my speed from. But I always grew up running track. I ran in track clubs when I was 10, 11 years old. Lolo Jones was in my track club when we were little kids, competing at these weird towns. And I ran varsity track as a freshman. So that was really one of my other hard things. I loved basketball. I think growing up that was actually my favorite sport, but filling out at 5'10" and never really being my nuanced best sport by any means, found more success out in the track and on the football field.
Cool. Now, what's would you say is maybe like the greatest lesson from your childhood and being involved in sports that you can kind of pull out and has maybe stayed with you all these years? Is there maybe one lesson or a couple lessons that you say, hey man, I learned that back when I was like in junior high or in high school through wrestling or track or football or whatever? Is there maybe a couple that you can think of?
Yeah, I think the two that kind of come to mind is one, just when I was a kid, I had this southern accent, so it's like sports is the way I gained friends. I was picked on, I was made fun of. I really struggled to make friends. And then on the flip side, like I said, when I ran freshman varsity track, the only other kid that ran varsity track as a freshman was from Sudan.
Okay.
And he was pretty much learning English through Tupac and his, Discman at the time. But his name was Ruach Jaklau, and, for going to a predominantly all-white school in the middle of Iowa, he gave such a perspective, and to see other people include him, and to be a part of some, championship relays with that kid. And he was just an incredible competitor that came from a different world,
right, for sure.
That we ever knew. So I think from not feeling included to being on the flip side to try to include kids, I think sports is just, whether you look at it in your community at the global level at the Olympics,
absolutely,
that's what makes sports special, I think. So that, and I think the other thing is, we talked about different sports, and you see a lot in youth sports now, is don't judge kids' talent so early, and don't let kids judge their talent so early either.
Right.
I mean, I was a B-team basketball player in middle school, B-team basketball player freshman year, lightweight middle school football team, never on any all-star teams. I think played on, before high school football, I was on 3 winning teams in my youth sports life, So, the things that we think matter, the victories, don't matter nearly as much as the development and getting to be a part of different teams and learn different sports. And I just think it's silly when people focus on one sport, at a young age. And it's like you wouldn't have your kids stop taking science and math and only focus on English at sixth grade. But we do that with athletics and physical literacy all the time, where they see now some kids learn their sport, but they don't have basic physical literacy in simple things. So I think just, learning to develop through the challenges that each sports provides, and the personal challenge of including and learning to work with people that if you give them a chance, they're not only going to be awesome teammates, but teach you lessons way beyond that team.
Cool. Now, post high school, you went to the University of Northern Iowa and played football. Do you want to just maybe touch on that experience and just share a little bit about how that was for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, especially out of the gate. Getting recruited as a high school kid makes you feel special.
For sure.
But then you get there and the work starts, and it's everyone's just as fast as you. You don't have all these advantages you had in high school, so it does get you to focus more on the techniques and fundamentals, and really learn the game at a new level that I never understood the game at in high school. But in my redshirt year when I was playing, I had a back injury and ended up having a fracture in my third lumbar. So that was a real setback at 19. A couple of doctors like, you're done playing ball. It was this third doctor that said I could, rest, rehab, and come back. But that was a struggle at 19, having I just got here and trying to create my space on the team, and now I was having it taken away and in the training room more than I was at practice, and that kind of setback. But I was able to kind of push through that, and played. By the next year, I was able to come back and play a lot of nickel and special teams, and then start my last 2 years. And junior year, lead the team in tackles, and senior year, be a captain. Went to the national playoffs twice, both times national semis and quarterfinals, lost the eventual champion. So it was a great experience. And looking back, I think, I wanted to always play college football at a higher level. Dreamed of playing in the NFL, just like, a lot of kids do. But when I sat back and looked at play on ESPN, I did it. Play with or against NFL guys, I did it. And, I achieved some of these things that I wanted to set out to do, even though they might have been labeled or shaped differently the path my career took. But they're all great learning experiences, whether it was for myself or absorbing from them.
For sure. What did you study at UNI?
What did I study? I like
football.
it's funny. Like people say that as a joke, but yeah, like when I saw that, I kind of wrote down football team dynamics and people.
Yeah.
And I think that was literally what I spent the most of my time doing, and that's where you spend your hours.
For sure.
You spend more hours. You spend 20 plus hours or so a week, whatever the NCAA rule is, plus whatever they tack on. Yeah. And you spend maybe 4 hours in a class.
For sure.
Every week.
Yep.
And so the amount of, I think also lies a great potential when I work with college athletes and college teams to work on those relationship dynamics, really try to get to know the people that are somewhere across the room from you. And just studying people in college was a huge thing. And you kind of touched on the identity. One of the things I really struggled with kind of at college was when if I met someone or was doing a project and they'd be like, oh, you're a football player. And I would always put my hand out, say, my name's Tyler. I do play on the team. But, they would lead with that. Yeah. But that's, I think, one of the little things. And I had a great conversation with one of my teammates that played in the NFL for a little bit. Now he's a broadcaster, WHO TV Des Moines. But, he brought this point up once when we were talking about how once you go to play college sports, it's the lead intro for everyone that knows you and everyone that doesn't know you. This is my friend blank who plays football. This is my friend that played basketball at CU. It's the lead-in of who you are for every introduction once you kind of go into sports. And I think that's where you see the start of this identity because people you don't know identify you as that.
Right.
So it's very easy to people that know you to give you that moniker as well. So I think when people introduced or engaged that way, I always want to be like, I'm a human. I play football. It's a part of me.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I think for me at the time, it helped me to also just mentally separate that too, to give a little bit of a boundary between that.
So to kind of wrap things up in regards to...
Sorry, for real, I did get a minor in economics and majored in marketing.
Cool.
So,
right.
And an emphasis in sales. So I did get a degree and some minors and stuff. But I always joke too, the business school, 80% of what I learned was I didn't want to work in business.
Right, yep. Yeah, I'm like 2 classes away from a business management minor, which I don't think I'll ever get. But yeah, man, it's just different once you're in college and taking those classes than when you're out in the quote unquote real world. Because nowadays with the technology, like podcasts and all that, you can learn so much stuff for free and then go to college, however you want to word that, and spend thousands of dollars. And it's like my bachelor's degree is in exercise science. All that stuff, a lot of the stuff that I learned like 10 years ago when I graduated, dude, it's outdated. Science is, you know what I mean? So it's just like, that's a whole nother rabbit trail I don't want to go down. But man, yeah, it's just, you kind of sometimes go to college, you're like, you either learn you don't want to do that, or it's like, dude, I'm working and going to college, and I'm learning actually more working in the quote-unquote real world than I am at college. I don't know, man. It's
totally.
It's crazy, but there's nothing that can replace life experience, you know, and being in the real world, and like you're talking about communicating with people and interacting with people, because that's at the end of the day what it's all about. So, okay, so just to kind of wrap things up with Iowa and the earlier years, Tyler, because I'm from Iowa, I was born and raised in Iowa. I was actually born in Des Moines, and I think you said you lived in Urbandale before I moved out here. I was living in Urbandale. That's where my sister and her family still live. So we have a lot of commonalities, and there's a lot of positive, a lot of awesome things about Iowa. Is there something about Iowa that you really appreciate and are thankful that you had the experience of growing up in Iowa?
Yeah, I it's probably cliche, especially if you're an Iowan, but I think just the values.
For sure.
I guess just Midwestern values, kindness. And when I moved out here, it was interesting because everyone introduces you people from the Midwest, and it's like, you'll drive with them. It's like, I know, I will. I'm from the Midwest, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think that and just work ethic.
Absolutely.
And I grew up in, like you said, Urbandale, Des Moines. People always ask me, like, do you know how to milk a cow? Or did you? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about a farm.
Right.
I really don't. I should probably.
Me neither, man.
Be better, more knowledgeable there, but I don't. But you're also competing against schools that are outside the city, also saw a different way of life, and sometimes a lot of those guys became teammates at Northern Iowa that worked hard on the farms and went to school and had a job and played sports, and it was a different lifestyle than maybe you grew up with in Des Moines or the Quad Cities. So admiring other people's work ethic there is probably the biggest.
Cool. Yeah, and that's something that I've lived in several different cities and different states, and I think that's the overall thing that I hear from other people, and I would say is just the work ethic. There's just a different work ethic in the Midwest. I don't know what it is, but
I want to follow it up too with a little clarity that other people have great work ethic.
For sure.
It's just like just do the work and don't complain about it.
Right.
It's just quietly done, gone about your business.
Yeah.
Outsiders will maybe make more commentary than the person that had to go through it.
For sure. Yeah.
I think was kind of part of that.
That
witnessing that work ethic. Like no one's complaining, just get the work done.
Yeah, and that's what you see with the farmers, man. They're up at 4 a.m. milking the cows, doing their thing. And I think, because I didn't grow up on a farm, my mom did or whatever, but a lot of people, especially now, the Des Moines area, nobody's grown up on a farm. That's all changed, but still, I think there's just a generational mentality that even a couple of generations haven't been on a farm or whatever, but there's still just something about kind of those roots, if you want to say it that way, that just kind of continues to reverberate through the state and the whole Midwest, because you got Minnesota, you got North and South Dakota and Nebraska and Missouri, but that whole kind of region is, that's what I hear is just the work ethic, and just, which I'm proud. I'm proud because I consider myself a hard worker, and I take pride in that myself. And when people, generally speaking, speak about the Midwest and talk about the work ethic, it's like, hey, that's a positive value. You know what I mean? Something to stand on. So cool. All right, so let's transition then. So let's just start talking about a little bit maybe post college and what it was like for you when you were officially done playing sports. Just like I talked about earlier, there was a struggle for me. If there was maybe a little bit of a identity struggle, if you want to touch on that, but what did kind of those first few years post-college look like for you?
Yeah, so like I kind of made the joke about business school, but the business part I was interested was professional sports.
Okay.
So I had a department head in our marketing department that set me up with independent study on sports and kind of got me pushed on some reading and self-study that way. And to me at the time, I felt like I don't want to work in these businesses. Sports have always been such a central focus of my life. I should make it a central part of my business career too, right? Mm-hmm. And it just kind of made sense. And most people said, there's a challenge there. There's very small opportunities. And so I learned quickly by interviewing people that had the positions that I wanted of how they got them. And that really helped how to navigate the process to get interviews with professional sports teams and get your resume in front of the right people. So in Chicago, actually, the first job I was working for a hospitality company selling like corporate level, C-level executives to golf tournaments, IndyCar, Final Four, Super Bowl, luxury. It was a terrible place. It was a British-owned company. And the White Sox had just won the World Series. I left there, ended up kind of timing right, got an internship with the White Sox following the World Series because they had needed some more staff because they were a little more popular finally in the city. And I got an internship there. At the end of the internship, they didn't have a job for me. They hired this other gal instead of me for this one position. They did help me get introduced to Mike Ditka. I worked at his Arena League football team for about 5 months. The reason it was only 5 months was the person they hired instead of me quit on him. And I just emailed the boss, and I kind of have that job now. And they said, call us tomorrow. White Sox hired me. I spent 4 seasons there. And, when you touched about the identity thing, it was really after, I had a new job title. We had shifted offices, and I liked where I was in the office. I was working professional sports. I was seeing behind the scenes every day. I could go watch batting practice with the Yankees whenever they're in town and see these professional athletes up close. And the things that I thought would make me happy and fill that, but at kind of towards the end of that time, I was about 28, and one of my other really good friends helped me kind of notice. He's like, "You're not yourself, man." And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And really had to look in the mirror, and I was going through a bad relationship and wanted to pin all my problems on that person. And it was tough for me because it was first I remember going to talk to our HR lady at the White Sox, and she was the first one I kind of confided in besides this friend. And she was like, you can go talk to someone. I was like, what do you mean talk to someone? Like, therapy? Like, I'm a football guy. We don't have therapy.
Right.
Like,
Well.
what are you? And, she, I really thank her because she's like, this is through MLB's assistance program. You can go talk to this person. It's free. Just go do it. So I went and talked to that guy and he set me up with another therapist after kind of a session and went and talked to her. And of course, that was like, I just remember walking into that day. It's like the greatest day ever. And just going through that, it really helped. And some of what I unpacked in that process of just talking was, this association with sports and this identity of who you were. And I thought at the time, being around a pro team, and that would fill a lot of those voids. But I like to joke, like, when you're a college athlete and you walk across campus, strangers say nice things to you. They feel like, good game, dude, right? And they also say mean things. I remember once I was on the video game, I had a kid in class tell me that I was better on the video game than in real life. So I was like, hey, when I play on the video game, I am too.
Right.
I sack everybody, But you do have these people that really are in your life filling you up, with encouragement and associating what you're doing with the sport with some sort of glory or success.
Right.
And when you go work a real job and you have a great kick-ass day, and I was in Chicago, and you walk to the train, no one says shit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sorry, no one says great day.
Right.
Way to work so hard, because it's not that coaching environment. And when you're so used to that, and I think especially in football where you got 100 guys, mostly like-minded and surrounded by a thing that I've talked with a lot of teammates and former athletes too that someone played at the pro level suffer with that transition when sports go. So for me, it was very helpful just to really learn about myself through talking to someone.
Right.
And I think that ability by going through that process has allowed me to help some other athletes and younger people that I've seen go through that. And it's one of the key things. One of the 3 things that really pushes me to do what I do on a day-to-day basis working with coaches and kids.
Right.
Is to build a mindset you can attach those things to the right purposes, the right principles, that when sports are gone, your purposes and principles survive and you can still go kick ass with those.
Right. Now, so then from the White Sox and that time, and then talking to this individual about some of the maybe struggles that you were going through at the present time, what was the genesis after that then, or what kind of unfolded after that? That time?
I think the other part was just taking stock of what I wasn't doing in life, and I was so active, of course, lifting as a college athlete, and had got away from some of that, and drank a little more alcohol than probably I should have in those 20s, and so I started running. I was like, I'm gonna go run a half marathon. Let's go do it, right?
Just like that, right?
Yep. And I tell people, and I've told this story to friends, like, how'd you get into running? Because now, I'll get energy and run a half marathon on a random Tuesday once in a while now, if I'm feeling good. And I tell people that I made that decision, and I went down to the gym we could work out at the White Sox. I got on the treadmill, and I did 0.8 miles that first day.
That's funny.
And I marked it down, and I came back the next day and did 1.2. And I was just had to kind of rebuild that physicality and built up and beat a 2-hour half marathon, which was my goal for that first one. And it also gave me a new hobby, but part of it was getting that physical fitness back, getting that. And I think especially when you can see growth through that, it does take time. Yeah, if you go to the gym one day, you're not going to notice anything, but if you go 10, 20, 30 days, you're going to notice things a lot more than you can in other places. So to just push yourself there and see growth, I think creates the space for you to push yourself in other areas that aren't physical, whether it's being a better husband, father, coach, teacher. Starts being a better you.
Cool. So you just touched on, being a husband and father, and as part of the introduction, that's kind of how I introduced you, the first 2 things. I want you, Tyler, if you don't mind, just sharing with myself and the listeners what it means to you, first of all, to be a husband, and the importance of your wife and that companionship in your life. And then please also share the importance of being a dad.
Yeah. I think those are the 2 most important things. First of all, my wife, I get choked up just thinking about how she is. She's so supportive of things, and Yeah, she's just been incredible. I think she's been, when you talk about that process, and I met her about 2 years after I moved out here, and just an incredible person that is always there. And as a husband, I want to be the same thing. And I think that's, one of my buddies and I used to always joke. He's a former coworker, and we used to joke about turnover of staff members and say, availability is the best ability. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes there's nothing truer than that with being a husband and being a father. So being a father, new to that, but 3 years in, just being there. I think for whatever your kid needs, and every parent out there is going to have kids with different needs, challenges, sure, whatever they can do, and whatever their framework of capacity is in their lifestyle. But especially as they get older, I think kids spell time. I tell coaches all the time, they spell time Love. So I think same with our wives and husbands is not just first being there, but then how do you improve the quality of that time? Because as your family grows, as your business grows, you only get busier. So for me, it's a constant challenge of always being available. When can I be there? And then how can I improve that quality of time? How can I make that the joyous time for my son, whether it's going to a park or going to get ice cream or whatever it is, or with my wife, is it just going to a coffee shop and relaxing with quietness or something? But follow that up part is just if you don't ever be content in those two areas, right? Because I think when you stop trying to look for intent to be a better father, how do you look for intent to be a better husband? And you do that day by day, hour by hour, in the moments that you can. But when you look for those moments and try to find quality in those moments, hopefully it leads to being more than adequate at those two roles for my son and my wife.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing that, man. And I just want to start touching on a little bit, because I think this is overall what the podcast is going to be all about. And that's kind of the purpose, passion, direction, vision, all of those words kind of lumped together, because there's a lot of similarities and all that. Because just as you have been unpacking your story, there was, to me, seems like a transition and a turning point when that individual suggested that you kind of go talk to this MLB person and kind of get some things off your chest and open up a little bit. That seems like that was definitely a turning point in your life. Am I fair in saying that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's start talking about the importance of not only you and myself, but just human beings overall. The importance of having purpose, knowing what they're passionate about, having goals, and just knowing why they're here on this earth. So if you just want to kind of start maybe just sharing a little bit of your perspective and all of that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of touched on, the story of kind of my late 20s of overcoming that. Really one of the other key factors that passions of what I do, and I tell this frequently to the student athletes when I talk to them, but my senior year of high school, I was having a great career and a good season at running back, and was on pace to achieve a lot of the things I set out to do records-wise and notoriety-wise. And our homecoming game, 7th game of the year, we were playing the 0-7 team, perpetually bad team in our conference, and they had a quarterback that was a stud, though. He's all Big Ten point guard at Iowa, Jeff Horner.
Yep.
I remember that name. So,
I remember the name.
Well, he came in on our homecoming and scored 3 touchdowns from 3 different positions in 5 minutes and had us down. And as we tried to climb back in that game, I got dropped for a loss, and kind of my linemen, who were amazing, I think 3 or 4 went on to go play at college at some level, and snapped back at them like, come on, we're better than this, let's go. And as I walked back to the huddle, spiked the football, and that football bounced up and hit the referee right in the face. And so I got on a sportsmanlike penalty. I didn't see that, it happened behind my back. He probably didn't know what hit him in the face.
For sure, yeah.
We ended up coming back in the game, third quarter, it's 42-21. They haven't scored since those first 5 minutes. And, I'm racking up stats, and they become that team. And gets a little cheap. My second cousin played linebacker on that team, and the other linebacker after a play, as we got out from a pile, like shoved my shoulder pads back, which made my foot kind of fly up. And I looked straight up at the white hat that was looking down at us. I was like, "You can let this fly, man." And he looked back at me like, "Remember what you did in the first quarter?"
Right.
And so I was like, just kind of swallowed, shut my mouth, and I went back to the huddle. That guy tapped me on the shoulder about 30 seconds later and said his colleague said I kicked him, and I'm bye-bye from homecoming. And so there easily went, my opportunity at Eclipse and School Records. A lot of D1 calls and letters got quieter.
Yep.
I joke Colorado State was one of the only schools that still kept recruiting me at D1, but this was 1999. Stories and the internet didn't travel.
Right.
There's nothing on film that could even be seen of what this call was, but that was the first time I'd been successful in sports and had people that knew you for that, and then to be embarrassed for that. And the nightly news ended with star running back Tyler Johnson ejected, tune in for more tomorrow. Luckily, they had more news to talk about. They never came back to that story.
Right.
But to sit out a game and watch my buddies play that they had to win, because the last game of the year we played the number one team, it was probably going to be a loss. So we had to win without me to even make the playoffs.
Right.
And that taught a lot of humility. And so I think that was one of the things. I didn't want kids to ever suffer from that.
Right.
That moment, because it was just everything going how you want it, and then boom, and I got uninvited from our state's all-star game. And coaches that were the little league coaches that thought you had an attitude were always, I told you so,
Right.
told you he'd be that kid, and so there's a little of that. But before going to college, it was a really good humility pill to swallow.
For sure.
And taught me a lot of lessons that really coaches weren't teaching me, because they allowed me to do things and get away with them because of my talent.
Right. So where is your passion and purpose and direction now? Because I know on your Instagram, your personal account, it says elevating others is my thing.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that from that experience, your senior year, and kind of having that humility. And then I think you said your freshman year you got injured, so that was probably another humbling thing. And then transitioning to the White Sox and talking about some of the personal things you're going with this individual. So where does the elevating others is my thing kind of come? And I'm assuming that is your passion, that is your focus in your life, and that's kind of why you're here on this earth. So share a little bit about that.
So when I was leaving college, initially before I got into the sports business, ironically, I had applied for an internship at the Pepsi Center.
Okay.
They said, I got the internship. Can you start in December? And I said, awesome. I can start in January, but I got to finish finals, and we might have football playoffs. Can I come and start January 2nd? I said, nope. We need to get you here now. And so at that point, the plan was to come do this internship for a semester, go back and finish my degree at Northern Iowa, and be a graduate assistant football coach. And then I was like, I'll have my taste of pro sports. I'll have my taste of college coaching. So I had some great relationships with the coaches that we had, and I thought that was the way I wanted to work with kids. And that never happened, so I ended up just staying around for this semester, not getting into coaching, needed a little time away from the game.
Right.
That's why I kind of wanted to come out here and then go back. But that pushed me into the pro sports thing. We kind of talked about that, and I moved out here at the job with the Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
And the second year I was with the Denver Nuggets here was when they had the lockout.
Okay.
And so the season wasn't started, and we were sitting around our desk twiddling our thumbs, trying to find stuff for us to do, and there's no season. You're waiting for the union or whatever to sign whatever agreement and go back to work. And a gentleman that I knew that worked in professional sports placement with executives knew of this company that was looking to launch a chapter here in Colorado called the Positive Coaching Alliance.
Okay.
And so this guy, Steven, that worked for Game Face Sports, I think out on the East Coast, knew my background already and thought I'd be a great help. And, especially when he asked the question, do you have interest in helping kids and coaches? And I was like, that was something I wish I could do more of that I didn't really have as many opportunities to do with my role in pro sports.
Right.
So that just was the perfect song at the right moment, I think. And I had a call with the founder of PCA and looked into the organization, what they were about. to me, when I heard positive coaching, I was like, that's not what I experienced, but it sounds great. Let's get that for kids. That sounds like a good thing. I could have used a little bit more of that. But that's why I got into that. So I helped launch the chapter here. A big piece of Positive Coaching Alliance is doing workshops and education with coaches, kids, and parents of navigating the challenges and emotional stresses and things that youth and high school sports provide. I saw some of our great trainers that we had, and some of our national championship college coaches, and I was like, I want to present. I want to teach some of this stuff. And so became a certified trainer through Positive Coaching Alliance to present that. I still present a lot of those workshops around Denver and some of the West, Utah and Arizona as well. And about 2 years ago, I wanted to really get more face time with coaches and kids. And so created my own endeavor to, with my background in football and some of that, to work with more young men in football. And then wanted to be able to create some flexibility of my own, that my own business could, of how I could work with teams. And, last week I was working with one of the local high school football teams and, jump in and run 5 110s with them. And to see, my hammy was really sore. I almost pulled it. But when you have a high school kid look up and the dude twice your age at 36 years old is keeping up with you on your gasser, it gives you a little bit more credibility. Absolutely. When we sit down and talk about how we're going to get better, how can we be better leaders. I'll line up with you and blow a hammy out here if I have to earn your trust.
For sure.
So just being able to do some more physical things with teams, which is fun. And then also being able to work more hands-on with a head coach of what their needs are for leadership, mental toughness, creating culture on their team, being able to meet them where they're at and then help them get where they want to get.
For sure. So talking about leadership, Tyler, there's a lot of books that you can read, a lot of podcasts you can listen to, a lot of different perspectives on leadership. And I just want to see if you agree with kind of my perspective. For me, it's like if I'm going to be preaching or teaching or sharing something with somebody, that person or those persons should be able to look at my life and the words that I'm trying to share with them. My life should be backing up those words. I should be practicing what I'm preaching or what have you, however you want to word that. Would you agree with that? Like in regards to leadership, it starts with the leader or the person that's striving to be a leader. They need to be doing what they're going to be trying to lead others to do.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, leader starts with the leader, and whoever that leader is a human being. And another way I've heard that is, leadership is also, living by principle, or self-discipline is, how are you living in regards to your principles?
Right.
So I think leadership needs, if they're not aligned with their own principles, they're not going to be leading many people.
For sure, yeah.
Because people will see through that.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be very long. People are smart. Kids are even smarter these days. Don't ever underestimate them. That they'll see through things that aren't genuine, or when you don't do what you say.
For sure.
Whatever coaches or kids, and every parent knows that you say one thing, you do another. Every human behavior tells us to test that gap. Mm-hmm. And some adults will roll their eyes at it, and I'm like, what do you do when you see you're going 10 over, you see a cop? You slow down, and then and they speed back up.
Right.
And it's like, you're going to test that gap. No one's looking. I'm going to push it a little bit. Just a little bit. Not dangerously, but a little bit.
Yep.
And so, leadership, to me, a big thing is to be a good leader, is to have self-awareness. And to have self-awareness, you need feedback from those people too. So, but I think you're right on. Leadership starts with the leader. It starts with the person. If you can't lead yourself, you won't be able to lead anybody else anywhere.
Amen. As a leader, as somebody referring to you, Tyler, who has his own business and is interacting with youth and coaches and athletes on all types of levels, for you personally, and then overall for somebody who is a leader or in some sort of leadership position, what is the importance of being and staying teachable, coachable, and having that humility?
It comes down to relationship, You said humility, coachability.
Just a leader remaining teachable, coachable, and just having humility to continue to learn.
Yeah, I think that's one reason leaders become leaders is that they're eager to learn.
Right.
And they're eager to learn about those people that they have an opportunity to impact or lead. Humility is always a big piece of that.
Yep.
Because if you can't have humility in front of your team, or in front of your class, or whoever you're leading, then they're going to know you're resistant to learning. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing I see with coaches all the time, is the greatest thing you can demonstrate to your kids on your team or in your classroom is, as an adult, your willingness to learn, make mistakes, be accountable, and keep on learning.
For sure.
If you can demonstrate your willingness to do that as an adult, it'll be one of the things that the kids will not go unnoticed.
Right.
Because I think humility, to me, humility is followed by vulnerability. And when you said that's one of the big things I like about leadership is leaders are willing to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. You know, from nothing good in this world started with the numbers. It's always the mind small group that created the change. Being vulnerable, taking feedback, allowing people to be critical, and allowing them to do it without your judgments back it is hard. But that vulnerability, that humility is what allows you to be a better person, a better leader. Because without that, you'll just create your own bubble, and your self-awareness won't be as acute as you need it, and you won't be able to lead people. So I think that, vulnerability, being willing to be a little bit vulnerable, leads to culture building. If you're not willing to be coached, you won't be coachable. Right. If you're not willing to accept, hey, I'm perfect, I'm going to make a mistake, you just be willing to be vulnerable. And when I deal with football players all the time, I'm like, you play football. You're willing to be vulnerable. I know, because you're putting on pads and going out here.
For sure.
So don't be afraid to be vulnerable in practice. Right. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable on the chalkboard with coach. Because this game, you're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so don't shy away from it in other aspects. And that's why I think teaching kids that context and mindset that's transferable and not just to a field is so important too.
What's been one of your greatest failures or mishaps in your life? And then, if you don't mind sharing that, what did you learn from that?
Oh, man. So many failures. I think I've had a lot of small failures. I think the big thing is also being a defensive back gave me a little bit of mindset. Yeah. It's like, put it behind you. Like every defensive back, especially in colleges, you got to have a short memory.
For sure.
So a lot of the things that I know if I sat and pondered that would be little failures, I did just forget or didn't let them to become part of my psyche. Some other things that sometimes I think when you spend more time and energy and maybe they don't pan out how you want them, maybe they're not as failure because you just stop putting the energy behind it. But when I moved here, one of the things we started in Chicago was a sports networking group for people in professional sports. Okay. And wanted to replicate that when I moved here to Denver and got it kind of going and learned the market was very different of what people wanted to do as professionals after 5 p.m. than what it was in the city of Chicago. And how we could, the good part was we connected with nonprofits here to kind of be able to raise and contribute that way, which was a new thing. But we were featured in Denver Business Journal as this new sports group. I was like, cool, we got a little PR. And then after I left the Nuggets, I just stopped. So it's one of those things that there's still a LinkedIn group. Yeah. But I still have this poster I saw it in the closet the other day, Colorado sports business professionals that we would have out at our events. But what I learned from that was, don't be afraid. I was a new employee, new to this city, and it got me introduced to a lot of people fast. Taking something I learned.
For sure.
Now trying to start with some leadership events and high school things and with student athletes at the high school and college level. There's a lot of skills in things that I learned in those processes of like that networking group and getting sponsors to donate stuff and getting a charity paired up that we could reciprocate and hopefully do some notable things back for them. So now with my leadership events, I'm trying to get sponsors to donate things for the kids, trying to get funds raised to handle the venue. And so there's a lot of things that, while that didn't pan out like I envisioned it wanted to big time, you learn from it. I think the other thing I think a lot of my failures come into is just relationships, man. I think always just, and I don't know how I put a high value on those, and I put a higher value on, who I let into those kind of circles. But there's times I wish, would see relationship for what it is than instead of what you want it to be.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. There's a quote that I took off the Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8 Instagram earlier today when I was kind of scrolling through that, and it's by Oscar Wilde, and the quote says, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." For me personally, I know that it's so important for me to know who I am, why I'm here on this earth, kind of going back to that vision, the purpose, the passion, all of that. It's been such a valuable anchor in my life. And at times I know that, you can get kind of sucked in. If you're around a certain group of people, you kind of start walking like them, talking like them, you kind of get assimilated into them. And that can be a positive thing, but it can also be a negative thing. So if you don't mind, Tyler, just kind of touching on be yourself, everyone else is taken, just the importance. And I think maybe you can probably touch on the importance of that quote towards youth, because youth, I mean, I'm a middle school, high school PE teacher, and at that age, kids are trying to figure out themselves, but then they're trying to be cool and fit in. So talk about the importance and the value of individuals, human beings, whether it's youth or adults, because I see a lot of adults trying to be somebody that they're not as well. Just what is the value and the importance of knowing who you are and just being who you are and being comfortable in your own skin?
It's great. I'm glad you picked that quote, because it's probably one of my favorites you could have done.
Yeah, it's fire, dude. I was going through, I was like, dude, that quote just kind of spoke.
And that hits me, and it's crazy. I was speaking to a middle school group in January, and a group of students came to talk with me after, and this girl could have been, I don't know how old she's, about half my size. She's too short, right? And she looks up at me and she's like, "Can I share a quote with you?" And I said, "Please." And it was, don't try to find yourself, create yourself.
Okay.
And I was like, it's a great quote, and it kind of came on those similar lines, you know. But for me, I think, some of the things that I unpacked, even when I was an athlete, I was always trying to be like other athletes. I think, how can I be like them instead of the thought process of how can I be the best me? And so you start to act behavior, you start to act people, and when you start to do that, it pulls you away from who are you? What are your principles? If you're trying to be like everyone else, you won't be like yourself. And if you don't know who yourself is, like I found out, I didn't know myself as well as I thought I did when I was 27, 28 and going through that. You'll have to figure that out. And that's one of the biggest things, and they've done, when I look at successful people, one of the things they I always identify is that these people can identify their values and principles, and they can articulate them to you. So when I work with athletes, I want to know, especially if this kid's going to sit in front of D1 coaches, you're going to need to know how to articulate who you are, what you want to be, and where you're going. And that stuff will change from when you're a teenager, but the more you can do that, and the more I've found to live by what are my principles, what am I going to prioritize with those, and not let people into them, the more you're going to know who you are. And the more you know who you are, the more you can help people. And I think, part of, my 20s, I didn't spend a lot of time helping other people. I didn't know how. And so I also had a decade of this, stuff stored up where I'm just like, now, how can I help you? How can I help your team? But it's putting me closer to my principles. And each and every day, when you can live by your principles will be your identity. But if you try to adapt to the environment, your identity won't be your principles, and you won't quite have an understanding of it when you leave that context of that environment.
Beautiful. And that goes right back to leadership, because if you really want to get real in regards to leadership and somebody who is a leader, it's service, right?
Totally.
So it all ties right back into going back to leadership.
And that's, I think, as much as I've studied leadership and had some great opportunities to learn from some amazing people, from Stanford to CEOs to other athletes and NFL coaches over the last few years, it's all about leadership. The selflessness. Mm-hmm. You're not leading people unless you're helping people. And leadership is influence. Leadership is helping develop other leaders. And sometimes people are like, well, everyone can't be a leader. It's like, well, it's developing the leadership qualities. Helping them develop their principles of leadership, and helping them develop that. I think leadership, when I work with kids, sometimes is this giant topic that's thrown at teenagers, but it's done simply. We think it's, when you look at the great leaders, it's just an aggregate of all the small things they did day by day to let their employees, staff, kids, whatever it is, know they're reliable, to know they're appreciated. There's no magic wand. Whether you look at, famous CEOs or coaches, I've read enough coaches' books to know that the difference in the big seasons was the little things,
right.
The attention to the people, the weekly reward and recognition of little things, whether it was giving Lawrence Taylor a little plastic army man, which Bill Parcells did to fire up that guy. Didn't think he needed it, but Lawrence Taylor loved those little plastic army men. And so, how do you lead if you're not inspiring others to push their limits too? So I think that's the other thing is you can't lead without trust. And I think that kind of goes off the vulnerability. If you don't trust the people, you won't allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Right.
But when you can create trust, it allows for vulnerability, which will create a lot better relationships, which I think will lead you to being able to support and provide selflessly with the service that your team needs, however you want to be as a leader.
Right. Okay, so we're kind of getting close to time here for our little study room at the Arvada library that we have reserved. So we're just going to wrap things up, kind of finish things up here. Tyler, I just want you to touch on the value that you have found personally in working with youth.
Man, my mom was a teacher and coach, so
Okay.
I've sat around a lot of dinner tables of hearing her stories, but I'll know that's one of the things that keeps her young. I mean, I'm always learning stuff from them. I think today kids are way misinterpreted and mislabeled by most adults as millennials, and I'm always pretty dismissive when they categorize their behaviors and things, and they haven't looked in the mirror to see where they've learned those.
Right.
Because biology and how we learn behaviors hasn't changed. It's just those behaviors have and what society will tolerate. So for me, it's really, again, back to like I said about sports, I gained such a good perspective too of what kids are experiencing. And I see they're experiencing challenges. I know from data they're experiencing challenges. They tell me they're experiencing challenges. So all those things, also lead me that when you look at schools and you're a teacher too, there's not an overflow of money going into a lot of educational things, but can I be a person that can give a team, a school, an overflow of support and what that might look like? So kids are freaking amazing, man. I mean, I sit down and I was at a coach's clinic yesterday, and this coach that talked, he had a 17-year-old on his team, asked him what he was doing this week, and he's like, I'm flying across the country. And he's like, oh, where are you going? He's like, no, I'm flying a plane by myself across the country.
Wow.
He's 17-year-old, solo flight, pilot license, local high school football
Impressive.
kid. And now the football coach is like, now I can't stop talking to him. I want to know all about his flight.
Yeah.
But it's like, there are kids that are like, and someone thinks this kid's a stupid millennial, right?
Right. Yeah. Probably.
right. In
Yeah,
someone's
yeah.
eye, it's someone's eyes, but
sure.
it's like there's so many, and really the generation problems didn't change. When I was a kid, my parents were worried that I was talking to girls on the phone too much, and using AOL chat, text message before text message too much. That was the problems of my high school. These damn kids are on AOL, and they're using the house phone. They're taking command of the house phone.
Right.
And so those are our major problems. But the communication channels have changed, for good and some bad, I think. But parents blame different things. When the TV and the radio came out, they blamed the TV and the radio stars, right?
Right.
Wrote a song about it.
Well, there's always issues, and you got to blame somebody, right?
So I mostly think, the adults, parents around them, it's the ecosystem. You're in education, but being that for my mom was for decades, also a teacher, I feel that I see this weird dynamic. Let's kind of go on a tangent, but parents have stripped schools of authority. You can't discipline a kid. How dare you criticize my kid or say that to my kid?
Yeah, man. It's
I was
intense,
used
dude.
to when I was in elementary school, I got drug out by my shirt by Mr. More than once. And when he grabbed my shirt and dragged me out, I usually knew I messed up. I was not going to tell my mom,
You
hey.
can't even put a pinky finger on a kid now. I mean, it's.
And at the
intense.
same time, they want to teach the things they're not teaching at home.
Right. Right.
And so there's this big gap, and it's not all parents, it's the minority, but those are the loud minority.
For sure.
And they're the kids that, usually they're kids, if they're not getting at home, they're going to act up at school. And if you remove the opportunity for coach and teachers to really create a path for a better opportunity for that kid, I don't want to say discipline because it's such a negative connotation, just to create a relationship to what that kid might need to be better, has been pulled back and pushed on education. So you've got this gap of, they want coaches and teachers to teach this, and we're not going to teach or support it at home the same way you are. So this dynamic of values and life lessons is really unusual when you go to work with a public school or a team, and you've got this wide array of parental experiences and foundational beliefs and things like that. And that's why I think it's so important for kids to take the time to think, who are you?
Right.
What do you want to be about?
Right.
How can we live by that every day? Because if you live by that, I know you'll be happier. I know you'll perform at a higher level, whatever it is you want to do. So,
yeah, and just to echo what you're talking about and touching on it again is just that identity, because I see so many adults that don't know who they are, and that then when they go home and I'm trying to teach their kids or interacting with their kids at school, there's a direct correlation. So this all goes back to the leadership, because it all starts with leadership or the adults, wherever in the instance of a child or kids at home, however the adults are, that's how the kids are going to be, because they're going to model the words and the actions of the adults in their life, and then us teachers get to experience usually the craziness of that, you know. So it's like adults need to know, we need to know as adults who we are, why we're here, what we're all about, and that's only going to positively impact our youth.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's all of this is just coming right back kind of to that self-identity and that having that passion, vision, and focus.
I don't ever fault those adults or parents because I don't know their experience.
Right, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And so I was a 27, 20-year-old adult. Admittedly, I didn't know who I was, right? I had to figure that out.
Yep.
I'm just grateful that I did that before I met the woman that I was going to marry, before I became a father. Because, man, you get, being a dad and marriage on those things, and you don't know who you are, man, there's a storm brewing. I don't know when it's going to rain, but for me, the better it's allowed me to fill the other roles of life better and at a higher potential, knowing now who am I, what am I about, and what's important to me. And I think just allows you to be a better husband, better father, better friend, better coach, whatever it might be. It lends itself to that. So
awesome.
I challenge people that are listening to think about that, be you and then work on being a greater version.
Great. All right, Tyler, we gotta finish things up here, wrap things up. If somebody wants to connect with you, go ahead and share how they can connect with you. If there's anything else that you want to share in regards to what's going on with Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8, this is your time to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, closing words. One of the things that I had a thought or that I wrote down, two things that I hear people tell me back, or I've had athletes tell me back that was helpful, but one that, once you figure out those principles in your life, other people's opinions of you aren't your business. Let other people's opinions be other people's opinions. Don't worry about it. And if you're trying something new, or you're, pushing something or trying to encourage someone and you get criticism, or some person, disregards what you're doing or downplays it, realize that you made it this far in life without that person's acknowledgement, without that person's approval, and it's just one person. So realize that you can keep going, and when bad things happen, it's just a learning experience. So, I think, be yourself, create, find out, look inward in who you are, develop that, articulate that, and the more you can lean on that, and that'll evolve as you become the better person you want to be. But, go on and be the best version of yourself.
And if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Email. Feel free to shoot me an email if you got any comments on this. I really enjoyed this conversation too. It's Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8, all spelled out, at gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram at Elev8 Educ8 Rejuven8. However, on that, the got the number 8s in there, so it takes like a minute to read it off. But you can find me if you just put in EDUC, the number 8, and then that kind of pattern. You'll also find me on Twitter as well. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and would love to hear any comments or thoughts from you guys out there.
And I want to thank you, Tyler, for taking time out of your Sunday to hang out with me, man, and connect. And it's a super fiery conversation, a passionate conversation, which I always appreciate that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your heart, and look forward to connecting for sure in the future. So
thank you, most definitely.
Awesome. All right, listeners, I just want to thank you once again for tuning into the 127 Fit podcast. If you would like to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at 127 Fitness. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. Website, which is just blogs, writings, 127fitness.com. If you guys could do me a huge favor and please like, subscribe, share, and then most importantly, leave a review, especially in iTunes. That is very, very helpful in the podcast world. And then if you think you would be a great guest, or if you think you might know somebody that would be a great guest for the 127 Fit podcast, you can email me, and that email is 127fit@gmail.com. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you once again for tuning in and hanging out with Tyler and myself. And per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." This time, until next time, I will catch you guys later.